Every racing driver has fans. Basically, every F1 fan supports a driver. But have you ever wondered who the actual F1 drivers like the most? I did, so I went through as much information as I could, as well as trying to account for how relationships change and not just digging stuff up from the past.
What's happened with Max?
Nothing, just an incident.
And I've attempted to calculate not only the most loved, but also the most hated drivers in the Formula 1 paddock. And some of the answers might actually surprise you. If you saw one of my last videos, you'll know that I've noted down how every single driver feels about every single other driver. And that way, I was able to find secret cliques or alliances between the pilots of our favorite 200-mile-an-hour funny machines. For this video, I've now decided to give each relationship a numerical value. For example, the close relationship between Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc, or Fernando Alonso and me kept in his basement, would be considered a very close relationship and therefore worth 2 points. A more friendly but not particularly close friendship, for example, Isaac Hadjar and Oscar Piastri, whose only documented exchange is Oscar Piastri texting Isaac to wish him congratulations on his promotion, and then of course sharing the podium in the Netherlands. This is worth +1 point. Then there's obviously a few drivers who've literally never interacted properly, and they get a neutral, which is worth a big fat 0. Now we get on to the negatives. Those who have a dicey relationship, like Verstappen and Norris at the moment. They were friends before, but as the championship's been going on, they've been slighting each other in the media every now and then. So they get a -1. Then there's the flat-out enemies. Hamilton and Alonso for 2007, Max and Lewis for 2021, Ocon and Gasly, because when they were kids, Pierre broke Esteban's Xbox controller or something. These all get a -2. How terrible. They should be put in prison. These are all added up together, and we have our most popular and least popular F1 drivers. So let's talk about who that is. And I'm going to start with the two McLaren boys. Mostly because if I don't talk about them, I'll lose out on about 50% of the F1 viewer base. They don't crack anywhere near the top 5 most liked drivers, which obviously isn't representative of how popular they are amongst fans. In fact, they're actually closer to the bottom in terms of the F1 paddock, with Lando scoring an overall +2 and Oscar scoring a +3. Whoa, whose shoes have these guys pissed in? Hopefully not Daniel Ricciardo's, he'd probably drink it. Well, Lando Norris has stepped on a couple toes. As mentioned, he's not speaking to Max right now, and I gave his relationship with Oscar Piastri a -1 because title fight. With Lando, it's a lot of these little things. Jabs at Lewis Hamilton in the media that have then caused them to have a few back and forths. Essentially, they're just throwing shade at each other. Norris also appears to have some weird relationship drama with Pierre Gasly. I couldn't care less about which F1 drivers are dating who, unless they were dating each other. That would grab my attention. Oscar, on the other hand, isn't all too friendly with Carlos Sainz. After a couple of incidents they had, especially during Oscar's rookie years, and now they're just not really speaking. And then Kimi Antonelli's been frustrated with Oscar because of how hard Oscar's raced him a couple times this season. To me, that just sounds a bit like a Kimi problem. The main issue with the McLaren drivers, however, is they just have no mates. Oscar has one properly close relationship on the grid, and it's with Yuki. That's because his mum is a massive Yuki Tsunoda fan. Aside from that, he's friendly with some people, or otherwise just straight up neutral. Same goes for Lando Norris. He's close with Carlos and Fernando, but essentially no one else. Which actually makes sense when you think about it, considering the two of them haven't moved around the paddock a lot team-wise, and so the need to form more relationships with other drivers just hasn't been there. So with the papaya and apparently quite lonely McLaren boys out the way, let's take a look at the 5 most popular drivers amongst the F1 grid. In joint 5th is Lewis Hamilton and surprisingly Gabriel Bortoleto. You've got one of the most and one of the least experienced drivers on the grid sharing 5th place. As you can imagine, Gabby has an absolute sea of neutrals. People who just haven't really interacted with him. But crucially, he also has quite a few close relationships. Him and his teammate Hulkenberg have got so close during this season of F1, Hulk's wife might actually start to get a little bit concerned, as well as Gabby being close with Verstappen, who's taken him under his wing this year, and of course he's close with his manager, Fernando Alonso. And last but not least, there's Ollie Behrman and Bortoleto, who are apparently really good friends. As for Hamilton, he's had quite a few close friendships on the grid. His dad manages Isaac Hadjar, so those two have become close. Also, Hadjar is just a massive Hamilton fan. He's rooted for Kimi Antonelli taking his place at Mercedes. He's even close to Esteban Ocon because both of them like remote control cars. These guys get to drive the pinnacle of racing machinery and still play with toy cars. Then again, who am I to judge? I honestly think it's pretty cool. Hamilton also collects a bunch of +1 points, considering basically everyone on the grid was a fan of him when they were a kid. So he just gets a lot of positive media from other drivers. It's just the weird beef with Lando Norris, sniping the Ferrari seat from Sainz, and of course his enemies Fernando and Max, that hold him back from being one of the most popular drivers on the grid. But as they were joint fifth, we now move on to the third most popular driver on the F1 grid, and it is Ollie Bearman. Editor Dan here. Script writing Dan is an idiot. He forgot that Alex Albon was tied for third place with Bearman. Albon is close with a bunch of drivers. Verstappen from his time as his teammate. Norris, you've got to remember the whole Twitch quartet thing.
I've never looked so good.
Especially George Russell, those two are like Bezzy mates. And also, he's just Alex Albon. He's a lovely guy. Let's get back to Ollie Bearman. He has the rookie benefit of not really having much said about him as well, but also having enough close relationships with people that he gains quite a few points. Charles Leclerc has supported him since he was in the Ferrari Academy. Him and Antonelli bonded really well as teammates in F2. Bearman even backed Kimi getting an F1 seat. Unusually, he's even become the, quote, best teammate of Esteban Ocon's career. And Ocon has a bit of a history of attempting to murder the majority of his teammates. So fair play to Ollie Bearman, he must be quite a likable guy. Let's move on to the second most liked driver, who personally I've had horrible, and I mean horrible, experiences with. Before I tell you who it is, do you ever struggle with sleeping? Maybe any kind of light annoys you, or maybe an evil presence watches over you? Well, that's where today's sponsor, Manta Sleep, can help you out. I love sleeping in the dark, but even with blackout curtains, the early morning sun still wakes me up. I'm a YouTuber, I shouldn't have to get out of bed until 3 p.m. Even when it gets dark, spooky Fernando Alonso still haunts me, and that keeps me awake, until I received the Manta Sleep Pro. Once I put these bad boys on, it's like Fernando isn't even there. And it's incredibly comfortable even for a side sleeper like me, as it's designed to put as little pressure on your eyes as possible. I struggle as well with my pillow always being too hot when I go to sleep, and then my face starts getting too warm. So I asked as well for the Manta Sleep Cool Eye Cups, and they help to keep my face cool, as well as also having the benefit of getting rid of those puffy eyes in the morning. The Manta Sleep website has a bunch of these accessories, so you can really just customize this mask to help you improve your sleep. In fact, I actually think I'm gonna have a nap right now. So if this sounds like something that might help you, use the link down below and code DANNOSKILL over at the Manta Sleep website. And if you order between the 19th and 27th of November, you can get 15% off site-wide and a free holiday recharge kit. Thanks again to Manta Sleep for sponsoring this video. The second most liked driver on the grid is Fernando Alonso. I guess he doesn't treat everyone else like he treats me. To start this section, I'm going to say Fernando has a lot of enemies, which might seem confusing. Hadjar has called him grumpy, and Hadjar is a big Hamilton fan, so it kind of makes sense they wouldn't get along. Lawson and Alonso had huge disagreements almost every time they crossed paths on the racing track. Do I actually even need to mention Lewis Hamilton again? And then Esteban Ocon and Fernando Alonso have about as healthy a relationship as Robert Fortnite Kennedy's brain after the worm. The reason Fernando earns so many points is because he has a lot of close relationships. Yuki Tsunoda considers Fernando his hero. He's mentoring Bortoleto. He wants to race Le Mans with Max Verstappen. He's been supporting Norris with his championship fight, and they were teammates at the 24 Hours of Daytona. He keeps George Russell in his phone case. There's more as well. He has close chats with Charles Leclerc and offers advice to him. Lance Stroll's dad literally pays him to be Lance's mate. And for whatever reason, he apparently promoted Alex Albon's shoes for free, and that kickstarted a little friendship. I just imagine Fernando is the kind of guy who comes up to you, slightly overshares, almost as if you've been friends for years, and then you become friends for years. Even though a fifth of the grid despises him, he's so close with the others, it boosts up his points tally. So you're probably wondering who is the most popular driver on the grid. And don't worry, after that, we'll go through the least liked people as well. I can tell you now, there are only 2 drivers on the Formula 1 grid who failed to get a positive score. But the favorite driver on the grid, despite being the one who is hated by a large portion of the actual F1 fan base, is Max Verstappen. Max is another one who, despite having his enemies, Hamilton, obviously, Esteban Ocon, who he's never liked since Brazil 2018, and Inspector George Russell, with those two telling tales on each other as if it is kindergarten and not a serious racing competition. But much like Fernando, Max also has a lot of close friendships. Not only has he taken all of the rookies under his wing as if they were his own daughter, we truly are in the Verstappen dad era. He's close with his former teammates Albon and Gasly. Also, Gasly is literally his childhood best friend. He's close with Nico Hülkenberg. If you're wondering why, you've got to remember Hülkenberg was very nearly in that Red Bull seat instead of Perez in 2021. And yes, I am going to ship Verstappen. Okay, to be fair, I gave Leclerc and Max's friendship a +1, but I believe they're in love with each other, okay? I don't care if Charles Leclerc is now getting married. After that, Verstappen is just also well respected on the grid by almost everyone. I think the fact that all of the world champions and the reigning F2 champion are all in the top 5 in this list really does show that results earn you respect in Formula 1. So let's now take a look at the least liked drivers on the grid. With Verstappen getting a score of +12, let's just see how big the gap really is to last place. In joint third least liked, we have a 3-way tie between Yuki Tsunoda, Esteban Ocon, and very surprisingly, Charles Leclerc. Tsunoda picks up a lot of negatives from people getting annoyed at him because he's impeded them in qualifying. As well as having the inter-team battle between himself, Hadjar, and Lawson, and that costs him some valuable plus points. If you didn't catch some of the drama in COTA, Yuki and Liam are pretty big enemies at the moment. There's also the recent incidents he's had with Sainz and Behrman that have cost him points too. I think the fact Yuki just hasn't moved around teams much during his career is a big reason he misses out on some plus points, because Gasly is one of his strongest relationships. Those two got along like a house on fire. I think Esteban Ocon being one of the least liked drivers is fairly obvious. Every teammate he's ever had despises him. And apparently he also just has some weird beef with Lando Norris, where Lando just doesn't seem to like him.
So that you could have had Ocon.
Yeah, I just didn't want to say his name.
What ends up really hurting Ocon the most is that a lot of the grid flat out ignores him. He has so many neutral opinions. In fact, outside of the rookie drivers, he has the most. I actually think this comes from the fact he wasn't as rich as a lot of the other drivers were. He grew up outside of the circles they would have been in, and so Ocon gets a little bit forgotten. Damn, I've even got myself feeling bad for Eshty Bestie and all the times I've taken the piss now. So of course, let's talk about Charles Leclerc instead. One of the most beloved F1 drivers by fans. How is he so disliked? Firstly, he seems to really have it out for Yuki Tsunoda, with Leclerc often being very annoyed over Yuki impeding him. The amount I saw was so bad, I've actually listed them as enemies. Then, ever since Hülkenberg and Leclerc collided at Monaco, Hulk has seemed to have it out for Charles slightly, being very critical of him whenever he can. Otherwise, it's mostly just Leclerc seeming to complain quite vocally. He wasn't happy with Alex Albon over the Imola incident. He gets fed up about George Russell complaining all the time, like in Hungary, which is valid. George Russell does complain a lot. He was critical over Franco Colapinto and his management of his fans, which again is a valid criticism, but just little things like that show maybe he's not all that friendly with all of the drivers on the grid. All 3 of these guys did manage to score a positive score. They all got a +1, but now we move on to our first driver on the list to not have a positive final total, earning himself a big fat 0. He said he was in F1 to win races and not to make friends. Well, he certainly achieved one of those goals. It's Liam Lawson. Lawson has made 3 big enemies. Yuki Tsunoda over their fight for the last spot in Red Bull, Carlos Sainz because of their many incidents across the 2025 season, and as mentioned earlier, Fernando Alonso. He's also been critical of Antonelli's Mercedes performance, I think just coping about his own performance in the Red Bull. Look, Liam, it was a good result if you finished the race, never mind scored points. Kimi has at least stood on the podium. Apart from that, Lawson just suffers from the neutral problem, not picking up many points because no one has anything to say about him. He gets a few from when people supported him against Helmut Marko, demoting him back to the Roblox racing team, and his relationship with Hadjar is another positive. Otherwise, that's really about it for Liam. So let's go on to the least liked driver on the F1 grid, and it is a landslide. Just to remind you, Max Verstappen won by 12 points. Liam Lawson was the second least liked driver with 0 points. This driver has scored minus 12 points, and it's of course Lance Stroll. Let's start with the good, because it won't take long. Esteban Ocon and Fernando Alonso like Lance Stroll. Ocon because he has like 2 other friends who are drivers, and Fernando because he's on the Stroll payroll. Lance then gets 5 neutrals from all the rookies who are yet to give their proper opinions on him. Otherwise, every single other driver is negative about Lance. Every single one. Not all of them are enemies, I'll give him that, but there are quite a few of those, so let's talk about them. George Russell has hated him ever since they were in F3, where George accused him of paying off his teammates. And before you say, oh Dan, surely that's water under the bridge, F3 was like 27 years ago. Oh no. George Russell was denied the Aston Martin seat because Lawrence still holds a grudge about this. Norris seems to really dislike Lance too, because he constantly takes little jabs at him over the radio.
But he doesn't seem to learn with anything he does, so...
Just listen out for Norris talking about Stroll. And then things once got so heated between Lance Stroll and Pierre Gasly, Lance threatened to fight Gasly. Well, the actual quote is Lance wanted to deal with it in the parking lot. I will let you infer from that whatever you want. And then, of course, there's just Yuki Tsunoda, who has stated he really doesn't like Stroll and has been involved in too many incidents with him. Was it really a surprise Lance was going to be last?
No.
In defense of Lance and some of the other people who scored badly here, I'm going to criticize my own method. Number 1 is I'm trying to quantify qualitative data. What that means is I'm trying to assign a number to a friendship. And I'm sure other people would interpret the driver relationships differently. For example, George and Lando often have like banter with each other, but I wouldn't note it as a negative relationship because they both seem to get that kind of humor. There's also media bias. The bigger drivers will always get more headlines. There's evidence that the further you go down the grid, the more and more neutral rankings you get. And there's also just a clear negative bias in the media, especially towards certain drivers like Lance, who already gets so much hate from F1 YouTube, from F1 Twitter, from F1 news articles. Negative headlines about him and a couple other drivers get more clicks. And so there's more potential for their relationships with others to be blown out of proportion. Of course, there's recency bias in here too. Leclerc and Antonelli got a -1 for the crash at the Dutch Grand Prix, but I'm sure by next year that will be more of a neutral. At the end of the day, it's just important to remember this is entertainment. Maybe I'll compare my findings to the driver's dinner photo at the end of the year if they do one, just to see if I got the relationships right. If you are interested in that, please subscribe. I promise I will make videos. Make sure you check out today's sponsor, Man to Sleep, and a big thanks to all of the channel members. These guys have been supporting me for quite a while now, and it really means a lot. You can become one from just 99p a month and you get access to early and exclusive content. Thank you so much. Have a lovely rest of your week and goodbye.